Dear colleagues, let's start our meeting, and our presenter at current meeting, Alina Urazbaeva. Alina, the screen is yours.
Thank you so much. Please let me know when you can see my screen.
Yes.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Alina Urazbaeva, and today I would like to present my research on the topic estimating the effectiveness of public policy to promote entrepreneurship during the COVID-19 pandemic, regional perspective. And to begin with, why should one study this topic at all? Well, micro, small, and medium enterprises are a special group of firms, mostly because of their size and their capabilities. Because, for instance, a micro enterprise, according to Russian legislation, is a business with up to 15 employees only and up to 12 million rubles in revenues per year. So it's a really small business. And obviously, it has limited financial resources. It relies on bank loans heavily, and it has lower managerial and technological capabilities comparing to its larger counterparts. And so, COVID-19 pandemic and COVID-related restrictions were a hard hit for this type of businesses because they caused supply chain disruptions, lower demand for consumer goods, and for consumer services. And so this caused two main outcomes for micro, small, and medium enterprises, and they were the terminations of the businesses and lower entrepreneurial intentions of the citizens of a country. And now let's take a look at the Russian stylized facts that prove these two outcomes. At the first graph, you can see that the number of micro, small, and medium enterprises in January 2021 decreased by 4% compared to a year before, and this essentially means that less enterprises were opened than closed. And so we can see that many of the micro, small, and medium enterprises had to cease their activities during the pandemic. And at the second graph, we can see that the fear of failure among Russian citizens increased by 4%. And what is a fear of failure? It's the percentage of the adult population who would like to open their own business, but they don't do this because they are too afraid that they will not succeed. And so we can see that the pandemic prevented 4% more people from opening their own business in 2021 compared to 2020. And these are two main outcomes of the pandemic and the restrictions on the micro, small, and medium enterprises. If we take a closer look to the revenues, we can see a large downfall in the total revenues of Russian MSMEs in April 2020. It was the month of the beginning of most of the restrictions. And we can see that in April 2020, the revenues of Russian MSMEs decreased by 36% compared to March 2020, and by 20% compared to April 2019. So it's not just seasonality, it's the effect of the pandemic and the restrictions. And so the research question of my work is, was the public policy to promote entrepreneurship during the COVID-19 pandemic really effective in Russian regions? And to make the research on this question, I stated three main hypotheses. The first one is that the COVID-19 negatively affected the number of nascent businesses in Russian regions. According to the literature, the effect of the pandemic is clearly negative, but in fact, we should really test first if the impact was negative or not for the Russian regions. And it is really important to determine this effect separately from the effect of the government support. Next, the second hypothesis is that the special government support for small businesses during for micro, small, and medium enterprises. And during the COVID-19 pandemic, positively affected the number of nascent businesses, so essentially helped to diminish the effect of the COVID-19 pandemic. And the third hypothesis is that the impact of the COVID-19 outbreak and government support was different for businesses of different sizes, micro, small, and medium enterprises, and for the businesses of different legal forms, so individual entrepreneurs and legal entities. And we take this distinction from the Russian legislation. In order to test this hypothesis, I've used monthly panel data from January 2019 to January 2022, and we can see that this period covers some time before the pandemic, during the pandemic, and after the pandemic. So it's quite a large time frame. For 83 Russian regions, unfortunately, data was available not for all the regions, and that's why I had to take only 83 of them. The dependent variable is entrepreneurship growth, calculated as year-to-year growth in the total number of the MSMEs. A little bit later, I will explain why I don't take just the total number. The dependent variables are divided into three main groups. First is the control variables, and they are lending to MSMEs and MSME employees. They were chosen because of the literature studied and also because they are capital and employees are the two essential factors of production for micro, small, and medium enterprises. Next, to take into account the effect of the pandemic, I've used self-isolation index by Yandex Data Lens, where the self-isolation in a particular region was scored from 0 to 5, where 0 means that there were a lot of people outside, and 5 means that there were almost no people outside. So 0 stands for lower impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, of the restrictions during the pandemic, and 5 means higher restrictions and higher self-isolation. And the last group of the independent variables, sorry, are the governmental support and governmental support during the pandemic. I use these two variables in order to see if the slope coefficient for the government support during the pandemic was different from the one in the general times, so even outside of the pandemic. Now let's take a look at the dependent variable. We can see that the number of MSME, just the number of MSME, has a large seasonality. And this is because every year in July, August, Russian micro, small, and medium enterprises have to file themselves in order to obtain this status. And if they fail to meet the requirements to be considered as a micro, small, or medium enterprise, or if they fail to submit the data, they are excluded from this register, the unified register for micro, small, and medium enterprises in Russia. They are excluded from this register, and they cannot be restored until 1 year after. And so that's the source of seasonality. And to combat this issue, I've used year-to-year growth, which we can see the line is not so seasonal. And it is calculated just by comparing month of a particular year to the same month year before, for example, January 2020 to January 2019. Next, if we take a look at the micro, small, and medium enterprises density in Russian regions, we can see that it is very different among different regions. They are highly heterogeneous. And for example, in some republics, like Republic of Ingushetia, there are only 8 micro, small, and medium enterprises per 1,000 of people, while in the regions like St. Petersburg, there are 8 times more enterprises per 1,000 of people. And so, knowing that the regions are so heterogeneous, we use the fixed effects approach because we need to take into account the special features of different regions. Now let's take a look at the model. We have briefly discussed the variables that I employ, but now let's take a closer look to the dependent variable. I use 9 dependent variables, 9 different dependent variables in order to capture the effects for businesses of different sizes and of different legal forms. For example, if first 3 models, they describe the dynamics for micro, small, and medium enterprises of both legal forms, individual entrepreneurs and legal entities. Models 4 to 6 describe the dynamics for micro, small, and medium enterprises, but only individual entrepreneurs. And models 7, 8, and 9 are dedicated to micro, small, and medium enterprises, but only legal entities. And that's why I have 9 models in total. Here are estimation results for micro, small, and medium enterprises of both legal forms. Here are estimation results for individual entrepreneurs and legal entities. I don't want to spend much time on these tables. We can come back to them later if we will have some questions about them, but I would like to draw your attention to these outlines from these models where we can clearly compare the effects. And if we consider the first hypothesis that the COVID-19 negatively affected the number of nascent businesses in Russian regions, we can clearly see that the self-isolation negatively affected the number of micro-enterprises of both legal forms, as well as individual entrepreneurs and legal entities separately. There is no significant effect for the small enterprises of any legal form, but for medium enterprises, we can see even the positive effect, which means that we can partially confirm this hypothesis. The negative effect is true for the micro enterprises, but this is not the case for small and medium enterprises. Regarding the hypothesis 2, special government support for business during the COVID-19 pandemic positively affects the number of nascent business. If we take a look at the government support during the pandemic, we can see that the number of micro enterprises declined, even despite the government support, and that is why the slope coefficients are negative for micro enterprises. But the government support during the pandemic indeed helped small enterprises, small legal entities in general, and medium individual entrepreneurs. So we can also partially confirm this hypothesis. The government support during the pandemic really helped small and medium enterprises, but micro enterprises kept declining despite government support. And hypothesis 3 was that the impact of COVID-19 pandemic and government support is different for different types of enterprises, and this is true because we have seen that that micro enterprises and small and medium enterprises react differently to government support and pandemic, and also that legal forms of the enterprises also matter. Now coming to the conclusions of this study, we can see that the most affected group of all the micro, small, medium enterprises are micro enterprises, and I believe that it is because of their lower technological and managerial capabilities, and this effect is robust regardless of their legal form. Government support really has a positive effect on the development of micro enterprises outside of the pandemic. We can see this on the general results, but during the pandemic, it is not the case for micro enterprises, because during the pandemic, only small and medium-sized enterprises profit from the government support. And finally, that during the pandemic, all micro, small, and medium enterprises were in need of the financial support, but micro enterprises were especially in need of the external support. And so, regarding the policy implications, policymakers should prioritize consistent government support even outside of the pandemic, for micro enterprises especially, in order to make this type of enterprises more sustainable during during different crises. Monetary support measures are really effective for monetary support measures outside of the crisis don't seem to be so effective for medium and small enterprises, but during the COVID-19 pandemic, it really helped them to sustain. And finally, policymakers should also consider indirect non-monetary ways of supporting MSMEs, because the result outside of the pandemic were confirming that they don't profit much from the monetary support that I consider in this study. And I think that we have some time left, and that's why I would like to also show you some new part of my research, where I consider how different types of the quarantine regimes affect micro, small, and medium enterprises. So I think that this part of the research would nicely complement the first part. I consider it the same variable of the year-to-year growth in the number of micro, small, and medium enterprises during 3 different regimes of the quarantine measures: hard quarantine measures, medium quarantine measures, and mild quarantine measures, same as soft quarantine. And I tested via t-test and Kolmogorov-Smirnov test how different regimes of the quarantine measures affect micro, small, and medium enterprises, here without any legal form. If we take a look at some methodology, we can see that t-test essentially compares the mean values of micro, small, and medium enterprises, in this case for the regions with some particular regime of the quarantine measures, and so we can compare a region with some particular regime of quarantine measures to the regions with other regimes and to no quarantine measures. And Kolmogorov-Smirnov test is used to compare the distributions of the regions with different regimes of quarantine measures, but also it's kind of a robustness check for the t-test that I use in this study. And we can see that the stringency of quarantine measures affected MSME growth differently. So if we take a look at the results of the t-test, we can see that micro enterprises, just as in the first part of the study, are negatively affected by all the regimes of quarantine measures, while small and medium enterprises even show some positive dynamics. And according to t-test, they show some positive dynamics under mild quarantine measures. But if we use the Kolmogorov-Smirnov test, it shows that medium enterprises also can grow under medium quarantine measures. And yes, so we can see once again that micro enterprises are the most vulnerable type of the enterprise, and they are in most need of government support, which proves the first part of the study results. And if we take a look at the 2 types of help, government support and lending, why lending to MSMEs? Because during the pandemic, there were special regimes of lending for micro, small, medium enterprises. And if we take a look, if these values increased during the pandemic for Russian Federation as a whole, we can see that government support increased for Russia as a whole, as well as lending, and this is proved by the results of both tests, both t-test and Kolmogorov-Smirnov test. But if we run this test for every region separately, we can see that the government support increased during the pandemic only in 30 regions, while the volume of the lending to MSMEs increased during the pandemic in 74 regions, which is more than 2 times more, like 2.5 times more regions, where the lending increased during the pandemic compared to where the government support increased. And let's now take a look at which of these measures were really effective. Now, if we compare the effectiveness of these two instruments of support for micro, small, and medium enterprises, we can see that the government support, increased government support, didn't show any significant impact to the growth of micro, small, or medium enterprises. And in some regions, the number of enterprises even decreased when there was observed increased government support. But the situation is very different for lending, because in the regions where the lending was increased during the pandemic, the mean value of the enterprises mostly increased during the pandemic. So we can say that increased lending is really effective to promote nascent entrepreneurship in the regions of Russia. For instance, the number of medium, the number of micro enterprises increased with the increased lending under both medium and mild restrictions. Small enterprises increased under hard, medium, and mild restrictions when there was increased lending to MSMEs, and the number of medium enterprises also increased under medium and mild restrictions. So from this part of the study, we can see also, the same as in the first part of the study, that the quarantine measures associated with COVID-19 have a negative effect on enterprises, but mostly on micro enterprises growth. That the government support to small business during the pandemic was not as effective as the access to the credit, to special regimes of lending. And so we can draw several policy implications from this. First of all, same as in the first part of the study, special emphasis and special support should be provided to micro enterprises, as they are the most vulnerable type of the enterprise. The next implication is that there is a need to revise existing support programs, because they don't always prove to be effective, and during the pandemic we cannot say that they were really so effective. And also one of the conclusions is that there is a need to give preference to indirect methods of MSME support, because, for example, such as lending, because they prove to be more effective. Thank you for your attention. Now I'm ready to listen to your comments, answer some questions if you have.
Thank you very much, Alina, for so interesting presentation. Please, questions, comments. May I start maybe firstly about additional part of your presentation. Could you return to slide number 21?
Of course, yeah.
Let me check. Maybe previous. Let me look at the previous slide and next. Okay, and next slide. Excuse me, in this slide, you compare, for example, small enterprises, yes, with both united micro and medium enterprises, yes?
No, not really. When I'm comparing some type of the quarantine measures, I only compare them with softer quarantine that they are, for example.
Okay. Maybe in the next slide, could you let me check.
For example, I only compare like soft quarantine with no quarantine. I compare medium quarantine with soft and no quarantine, and so on.
Then let me, for example, you compare regions with, for example, mild quarantine with both united group of regions with мягкие and so you compare, for example, strong quarantine region with both united средние мягкие how
mild and medium.
Yes, united.
Yes.
I guess it makes sense to compare maybe only first and second group of regions with strong and middle quarantine, with strong and soft quarantine. How do you think? I guess it's not a very good idea, for example, compare regions with middle quarantine restriction with a united group of regions with at the same time strong and mild quarantine restrictions.
Yes, I totally agree with you. In fact, what I was trying to say, I only compare some quarantine regime with the ones that are softer than it is. For example, I compare strong quarantine restrictions with mild and medium quarantine regimes, but I compare medium quarantine restrictions only with soft and no quarantine. So I see like if this type of the quarantine helps comparing to if we wouldn't have it at all, but I don't think, yes, I agree with you totally. I don't think that I can compare it with harder restrictions.
Thank you for this explanation. Could you demonstrate other slides after? Okay, you split all region on region with government support and possibility of lending. But as I can see, there exists overlap. Yes, so there is a group of regions, both with increased government support and at the same time with increased lending. Maybe it makes sense to split all region in three groups. The first group only with increased government support, but without possibility of lending. The second group regions with increase in lending possibility only without increase in government support. And third group of region with both types of support, government support and lending. Maybe it makes sense to compare and to include in your models not two dummy variables, maybe three dummy variables or three types. How do you think?
Yes, that's a great idea. I totally agree with you. I didn't think before. I didn't think about this before, but yes, there is indeed overlapping of these regions, and maybe that was the cumulative effect of government support and lending that truly helped some regions to promote their nascent entrepreneurship. So yes, it totally makes sense to have three groups.
Thank you. And could you return to your models in the base part of your presentation?
Yes,
Maybe do you have some specification of your models? Could you return?
yes.
Yes. Thank you. I see you include, for example, fixed effect. How do you estimate your model? As model with fixed effects?
Yes, I use the model with fixed effects.
Did you perform, for example, Hausman test?
Yes.
However, maybe when we talk about a region, according an opinion, for example, of Tatiana Ratnikova, one of the best expert in panel data models, it makes sense to estimate only fixed effect model because our sample isn't random in this case. We use data for all available Russian regions. But anyway, I recommend you talk about your fixed effects that you estimate such kind of model. It makes sense, I guess. Thank you. Please, other questions or comments?
Yeah, Alina, just in order to get a better idea of the results, could you please provide the quantitative interpretation for these regression estimations? Because I'm not that familiar with the data, and it's, for example, not quite clear for me what does the coefficient for the self-isolation index means in the context of your model.
Of course, thank you for your question. If we take a look at the self-isolation, as I explained, the self-isolation index means the degree to which the citizens of a particular region comply with the self-isolation regimes imposed. And for example, zero isolation means that no one stays at home. There are as many people as in the busy day outside of the pandemic on the streets. And higher isolation, like 4, 5, means that there are almost no people outside of their houses during the day. And if we take a look at these results, we can see that the higher isolation here, for example, for micro enterprises, the coefficient is significant, so we can make conclusions about this, that higher isolation contributes negatively to the growth of micro enterprises. And micro enterprises is a percentage, so I believe that we can say that if we go from like self-isolation level 1 to level 2, if we increase it by 1 point, we can see the decrease in the growth of micro enterprises by as this is a share, the growth we can see the decrease by 1.34%.
And how many levels for this index there are? What's the range?
There are actually like 6 levels from 0 to 5. So 0 when everyone is outside, 1 like not as many people outside, but still pretty much. Then 2, 3, 4, 5, and 5 means that there are almost no people outside. like everybody is at home. But in fact, I can say that this is the theoretical framework of the Yandex data lens. But I've looked through all the data for Russian regions for this period, and I can say that even during the harshest part of the pandemic, the highest self-isolation observed in Russia was 3.6. So it was never no people outside. There were like some people outside, not as many as during a busy day in the normal times, because it would be 0 or 1, but still there was never like 5 on the scale of isolation. There was never no people outside.
Yeah, I see. So then I would like to ask you about the details about the government support, since I'm also not quite familiar with this type of support. Well, I believe that in your model you used like some sort of aggregated type of support. Did I get it right?
Yes, that's true. But it was not it was not aggregated for the regions. It was not the total number of support for Russia as a whole. It was a region-specific number every month, how much all the micro, small, and medium enterprises receive the support. Yeah, like how much each month they get million rubles. Of the support, but here in this model, I decided to adjust it for the peculiarities of the regions. So I used the PPP among regions to kind of unify this help to enterprises, and also I calculated the measure for per enterprise. Because as we can see here on this map, the density is very different, and so if we don't divide this help per enterprise, we cannot really make some conclusions, because for example, larger help to MSMEs in St. Petersburg can be determined just by the fact that there are more MSMEs than in other regions. And so I took the total number of support for regional MSMEs in a month, adjusted it for purchasing power parity among regions, and divided it on the number of enterprises.
Well, but nevertheless, it is aggregated across all small, medium, and micro.
Yes, unfortunately, I couldn't find the data.
Yeah, and further, you used like dependent variables for your different regressions, like the one for micro, the second like for
yes. I have to use the same measure with different types of dependent variable, because unfortunately for the moment I cannot distinguish between support for micro and small enterprises, small and medium, and so on.
Well, I just think probably like maybe there are some nuances to the legislation. For example, like medium enterprises are more likely or more easily to like to take this support from the government than the micro enterprises, and maybe that's why in your regressions, like you had some coefficients insignificant for one types of enterprises and significant for others. So
this is actually a great comment and really valid. Yes, that's true. I hope that in the future I will have a chance to get a robustness check of my results on this macro data by the results on micro data. as for the moment, I'm trying to gather some microdata in order to support my findings. So in the future research, I hope we will be able to distinguish these results. But thank you for the comments. This is really valuable.
That would be really cool if it if it will be possible. And my final question, also because I'm not that familiar with the microdata for firms, what is approximately the structure of I believe firms within each of these three groups? Like what type of the in accordance with the type of business they do, like I don't know, like sales, taxi, transport, or what types of firms we expect in each of these groups, approximately, like in general?
In general, yeah, thank you for your question. I think that on this data, I cannot really outline these types of businesses, but I can assume based on some statistics, on some facts that I know from the Russian business data, that, for instance, most of the micro enterprises are involved into sales businesses. But if we take, for example, medium enterprises, they can be so they have a larger scale of operations, and they are often kind of assisting some larger enterprises. So I hope that with the microdata, I will also be able to account for these types of businesses, but for the moment, I unfortunately cannot.
Yeah, I just thought that maybe it would be a good idea to somehow control for the type of business of like firms which are in your sample. Because maybe during the pandemic, like I believe they deliver, for example, delivery services were blooming, while like some other like restaurants or maybe like small cafes were terminated, so on. So maybe if there would be such data, it would be good to control for the type of business for these firms.
Yes, thank you so much for this comment. It is really useful.
Okay, thank you, Alina. That's all for me.
Thank you. Please, other questions or comments, proposals?
Actually, I have a comment. Could you please shift your slide to 20s?
Sorry?
The 20th slide.
20th slide, yeah, of course.
Yes, actually, in these third figures, we can see the Thames seems to have a great influence on the data. We can see always the average August is the minimums, and then we'll have the increased tendency. And we can see this fluctuations is repeated almost every year. Could you please explain it?
You mean the fluctuations in MSME number?
Yes, because we can see every August is the minimum.
Yeah.
Then we'll have the increased tendency, and these situations happened in every years.
Yes.
Why we'll have this condition?
Yeah, thank you for your question. It is because every year in July or August, we can see that in 2019 it was August, but then it became 2020 August also, but since 2021 it was July. And every year in July or August, firms have to file themselves as micro, small, and medium enterprises. So they don't get this type status automatically because of their number of employees or their revenues. They have to apply for it to be in the unified register of small and medium businesses. And so they have to apply themselves, and if they fail to apply, like they just forget or they don't meet some requirements, like if someone applies as a micro enterprise and they are told that they must have up to 15 employees, but they have like 16, then they are not considered as a micro enterprise, and they are not included in this register. And so every year they have to apply in summer, but if they fail to meet their requirements, they are excluded. And then during the year, they kind of reapply, and that's why the number grows. But then a drop down happens next summer again, because again, some firms forget that they have to fill this form again. Some firms don't meet the requirements, and so on. And yeah, this just happens because of the legal requirements and the need to apply every year. But we can see that if we compare the years month by month, the numbers still are different, and this gives us some information about the number of the enterprises in every year.
Okay, I understand. Thank you for your information. And actually, could you please share your result? Because is there any heterogeneities in the term of the journal? Because maybe there will be different outcomes in different journals. But actually, this is my advice. Maybe you can do some work about the heterogeneities in terms of the region.
Yes, thank you so much for this comment. In the main part of my work, I account for heterogeneity of regions via using fixed effects model. And here in this second part of the work, I also account for heterogeneity of regions by watching at region-specific effects. For instance, here I divide between regions with increased government support during the pandemic and the ones who didn't increase it during the pandemic, and same for the credit. So I believe that I capture some extent of the regional differences, but if you can advise me some new ways of doing this, I would be grateful.
Okay, thank you for your answer.
Thank you, Enjoy. Maybe other questions or comments, proposals? Okay, if we have no new questions, thank you very much, Alina, for so interesting presentation.